little thin here, but we have a quorum. Good morning. It's Friday, April 22nd. It's 9:03 a.m. and this is a meeting of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. We're starting this morning with Ms. Barrett from Joint Fiscal Office coming in to help us get a look at the financial landscape, because this year it's a particularly complicated landscape. We have the normal budget. We started the year with a surplus. We also have had the arrival of ARPA dollars, and on the horizon are infrastructure dollars, most likely. So with that, we're trying to have a better understanding in this committee of what the current budget looks like. And as opportunities to invest those other dollars, ARPA and infrastructure dollars, arises, the committee doesn't want to, we want to respectfully partner with whatever system we set up so that we can stay informed and make informed recommendations to those who will actually make possible appropriations or approve spending while we're out of session and not having regular committee meetings. So that's from my perspective, that's a goal for this committee. Keep us engaged at the right level in a helpful way. And good morning, Madam Secretary. Since this is clearly a topic of mutual interest and we all need to be pulling together to get this work done, and there's a lot of work to do. So with that, Senator Westman, because you serve on approps, you have maybe a finer way of expressing that. I don't know if you want to say anything more about this.
So the first chunk of ARPA dollars I get, we are replacing as much state dollars as we can with ARPA dollars, which is for items that have all been vetted in the legislature, approved, and for the most part, the administration and the legislature are reasonably on the same page. And in this process. And I think we've all agreed to that. As this money comes down, if the administration wanted to use more of the ARPA dollars between now and next January, is there a process for that?
So the ARPA dollars so we're talking about the state fiscal relief pot of money, the $1 billion pot in ARPA.
Yeah.
And your H315, which is now law, accepted that grant and made the use of ARPA dollars subject to appropriation. So the use of that $1 billion pot needs to be appropriated. There's not a joint fiscal process. There's not an excess receipts process around that now because of the way we structured the acceptance of that grant in H315.
Right. And in the budget, what we're discussing is swapping out monies that are appropriate for that to be used in the place of, say, for example, general fund dollars in weatherization that we're.
So when you say swapping out, so there, I guess I'd prefer to use the word investment of the ARPA dollars.
Yeah,
for
fine.
Using ARPA dollars, investing ARPA dollars in ways that when the governor originally proposed his budget, which that goes all the way back to January, before ARPA was on the landscape, at least this pot of it, he was applying one-time general fund dollars in certain ways. Through the process of the budget adjustment, the H315 bill, different choices of funding sources have been made for different types of investments. And so we have the sheet that, what in 315, what's been proposed by the House for investments of a portion of these ARPA dollars, what's been proposed by the governor for, he has a comprehensive plan for all the whole $1 billion pot. And what the Senate Appropriations Committee is working on right now. And so do you want to switch to that sheet for the moment?
Can I just ask if beyond those things that we will have agreed with in it, if the administration and the Secretary of A&R came in and said, we want to go further with ARPA dollars between now and next January, is there a process for that?
There's not at this point. It is subject to appropriation as it's accepted as a grant in H315.
And so
the budget adjustment process would be the next sort of opportunity to appropriate or reallocate ARPA dollars.
And
between now and then, yeah.
And my bigger question, given the fact that there might be a big infrastructure bill and that has, in your mind, have you heard any discussion about the because the world is changing around
things do seem to be moving more quickly on the federal level than we're used to a little bit. So that the thinking, I think right now in Senate appropriations is that all of the ARPA appropriations will be in one distinct part of the bill, not layered throughout various budgets in distinct sort of categories of investment. I don't think that they will make commitments for outer years because of the fact that the infrastructure bill is coming. And the thinking is that with the infrastructure bill, hopefully the what's in that bill and how it can be used will start to become, and how much money for various infrastructure investment categories, such as climate change, water and sewer, broadband, those will become clear in the fall. And what I think the concept that's being contemplated is when we appropriate the ARPA dollars in FY22, to the extent that an infrastructure bill that's yet to be known has dollars that could be applied to the same thing, if the ARPA dollars aren't expended yet, we would want to apply those infrastructure dollars first. And so that type of linkage language would be there. And then the budget adjustment process would be the process for it, to the extent that any of that happens, would be the process for reallocating ARPA dollars. And so we don't know, there might be things that we appropriate ARPA dollars for and dollars go out. It's not talking about, looking back in time and swapping out dollars. It's saying if it's not expended yet and it can be, there's an alternate source that's a better source, a dedicated source, because the ARPA pot's, still a pretty flexible pot. And the infrastructure pots will be probably much more discrete boundaries around them, is their thinking right now. So that's the concept of linking what we do for ARPA dollars now to what might be happening with a future federal infrastructure bill.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Senator Westman, please go ahead.
I just say there is a little bit of me that is a little bit of angst, because from May until January, if there are things that we saw that we might want to move to put ourselves in a better position as things changed at the federal level to access money, I personally, as long as everybody was included, some pared down version to give some approval to be able to be flexible, would not be a bad thing to consider.
So there is a degree of flexibility, existing in law. When we make an appropriation, the emergency board has the authority to transfer appropriations, and they've done that in the past. So if you make an appropriation in one area, you can sort of net neutrally transfer those dollars, and so that flexibility exists. I don't think the contemplation of sort of like what we had, because of the really strict at that time construct around CRF, is through the joint fiscal process. That's not really being considered.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. That's very helpful. So it's basically a cascade, sort of from most constrained dollars to least constrained. And I think as I understand what you're saying, is that most constrained is infrastructure. second most constrained is ARPA, least constrained is general fund budget dollars. Is that
that's pretty much the hierarchy, except that we just don't know what the infrastructure is yet, because it's not a
right.
it's a a hope for thing on the horizon. It's just not a real thing yet.
Okay, and one more question before we go to Senator McCormick. Just to clarify, for the dollars that were a month or two ago going to be general fund dollars, like on weatherization or something like that, now we're substituting investing ARPA dollars. Those general fund dollars that are sort of released from that commitment, where do they reside in the next 7-8 months? And is there a process for of reapplying them?
So that's the whole, that's what the Appropriations Committee is balancing. And so a big chunk of those freed up or, reassigned when certain things were reassigned to other sources of funds, and general fund capacity was created on the House side, and the Senate Appropriations Committee so far agrees that the biggest chunk of that is $150 million reserve for retirement obligations. And so that's just, it's taken off the table. It's sitting there in the general fund reserve for the next step of pension retirement activity, that effort, which the House just passed its governance and work group bill yesterday. That took up a lot of that general fund capacity.
Sure. Do you know what remains beyond 150?
So that, and those are, then the remainder of that is what the Senate Appropriations Committee is, there are things that can't be spent out of ARPA dollars. So that's all in the process of the Appropriations Committee right now. There's a list of one-time items of general fund spending for the remainder of that. What we will know also when we get to next fall is we're working in the constraint of the current general fund forecast. And we will know how the fiscal year 21 closes, and we will have the new forecast in July. So everything we're talking about in terms of general fund capacity now, we're talking about in terms of the current forecast for this year and next year. Obviously, when we close the year, and we have been running ahead on revenue, that picture will change at the end of April because of the timing of the tax collections being bumped out a month. We'll probably look like we're way behind when we end April, but that the likelihood is we're not really behind, it's the timing issue. But that picture of the general fund, which is not clear now, will be clear by the time we get to August and September. And that's the normal process, and those dollars just remain on hold. And then we, in the budget adjustment process and in building the next budget year, that's what we rely on. That's the known amount, along with the upgraded forecast or updated forecasts in that process.
When does budget adjustment conversations start prior to the commencement of the session, actually?
They do in the interim. So usually the administration puts its budget adjustment into the House committee sometime in December. House Appropriations in the interim year meets in December for the budget adjustment. And so it's a faster process in the second year of the biennium on the budget adjustment.
Thank you, Senator McCormick, for waiting so patiently. My last thing to make sure I got this straight is, assuming that the 150 freed up by displacing it with an ARPA investment is held for a pension obligation, can you say what, if any, remains that may be reallocated? It sounds like there may not be that much money to worry about reallocating.
So that's, that's exactly what Appropriations is doing, is saying, this is how much we have. If we move this, they're just making choices about within that remaining general fund one time. There are things that are being done with, that general fund one-time money. Like, for example, the House spent money on state modernization technology systems, and we're finding out that we can't move all that money into ARPA. We have to take some big chunks of general fund and do some of those systems with general fund because they match federal dollars. They can't be done with you can't match a federal dollar with
Right.
a federal dollar. So those those are all sorts of, that's the up and down in the process of the Appropriations Committee. And so,
Sure.
You can say, well, there was 211 that the governor spent in one-time money, 150, that leaves $61 million.
Right.
In that $61 million, the House has already made a bunch of decisions, and the Senate Appropriations Committee is making very similar decisions and reacting to things that are changing on,
Sure.
in that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Change seems to be the watchword of the year.
Yeah.
So Senator McCormick, thanks for your patience.
Stephanie, I think I understand. I actually just want to verify my understanding. Last year, when we were allocating federal funds, we were explicitly prohibited by the feds from using that money to reimburse ourselves for state appropriations, to pay the state back for money that the state had already decided to pay. It had to be.
That was to a certain date. That was the case. Yeah.
Okay. And my understanding is that we actually are not facing that constraint this year.
So
it sounds like we can.
We don't have really clear guidance on the ARPA pot yet from Treasury. We do have some very specific things that are written into the law of what you can use it for, and you have this sort of broad category of response to the pandemic. You don't have the time constraints that we had with the CRF, because the ARPA billion-dollar pot is expendable until the end of December 2024, which is halfway through our fiscal 25. So it's got a 3.5 year time frame on it, so people can breathe a little bit more. There is this tussle at the federal level with some states about whether or not you can take the ARPA dollars and use it to reduce taxes, that type of thing. That is not clear yet, but so there is not. What we went through last year was a series of constantly being updated guidance from the Treasury, where we thought it was so tight, got a little looser, so tight, got a little looser in the 27th, the December 27th bill to extend the time frame, that type of thing. We were constantly, it's a hard way to, and we set up a process through the fall for reversions and reallocations, trying to make sure that we were still working under the December 20 deadline, and now we're working on the CRF pot from before. So it was a very different experience than this pot, even though they're similar in size.
So there are potential limitations lurking out there that
there
may
are.
or may not
The one that gives us that's harder. So it's the housing bricks and mortar type money. That's the hardest one for us to see, to understand whether or not that's going to be allowable. It's very clear that you can spend it on the technology and the water. I think that because it's not explicit in the federal language, I think it's the housing piece that is the hardest one. And that's why what you'll see in the House bill is they didn't apply a lot of ARPA to bricks and mortar type housing stuff yet, because it's just not as clear.
Okay. When we, as I understand it, the statutory deadline for Treasury to finish writing guidance is May 11th, 60 days. Will we go through a similar process of the state, I don't know who the we is, the state of Vermont hiring consultants that help us interpret that guidance document? What was the house? It was like guard house or something like that.
Guide house is the contractor that the state procured last year, and I believe they'll be continuing on helping the state with this.
Yeah, that is my understanding as well, that they've been further retained.
Yeah.
Okay, well, great. Well, so if we could, I had asked Ms. Baer if we could look at some spreadsheet data, so that the tricky thing is that, to see all this, because there's a House proposal, there's a governor's proposal, and then there's the current work going on in Senate Appropes. So that to the extent that we can just have a overview of the landscape, and particularly the
Okay.
parts of all that money that's in play that are in this committee's jurisdiction, that will be very helpful. Even if we don't know where it's going to land, at least we will better understand what's in play.
So this sheet should look familiar to the
Yes.
Senate because it was used in the caucus the other day. And what it's doing is sort of laying out the picture of what was applied in ARPA, the blue column in H315. The column that is in the House bills, because they did their ARPA across several bills, the budget bill, the commerce bill, the broadband bill, and the capital bill. And then in the gray is the governor's proposal, and the governor's proposal sort of condensed down to 3 columns. What he's proposing for FY22, the collective amount from FY22 to FY25, and then his total. And then the unfilled out column on the far right to be determined is how the Senate will be doing the ARPA dollars. And for this committee, it's the, I'm gonna freeze panes. For this committee, it's the bottom sort of 2 buckets here. It's laying it out into several large buckets, similar to what the governor proposed in his plan. A few extra pieces, primarily the health and well-being and justice bucket, which the governor doesn't have included in his plan for ARPA spending. But it's the climate change and the water pieces that are really in the purview of this committee. And so the climate change pieces you can see in the House proposal, and then in the gray what the governor is proposing. And we know on the Senate Appropriations has gone over with the chair the sort of revised S109 pieces. The one piece that we know Senate Appropriations is not going to do is the $10 million of general fund to the municipal revolving loan fund for the municipal projects. That piece was done in general fund in the House because you can't use the ARPA dollars for a revolving loan fund. But because there's so much money flowing directly to the towns from a different pot of ARPA funding, the decision was that we wouldn't capitalize a revolving loan fund now. The state energy management program will still be able to offer technical assistance to the towns and charge, for the cost of doing that technical assistance will allow them to do that, but we won't capitalize a revolving loan fund at this point.
Right.
And the other pieces that are included here will be included, as I understand it, so far in the conversations in the Senate Appropriations Bill under the climate change section. And then I don't know if there are recommendations of pieces of the governor's proposal that this committee, particularly the year 1 proposal, that this committee would be recommending to Senate Appropriations. I do think there might be some conversation about, about intent, about reserving up to a certain amount of the dollars that remain for the climate action plan response in combination with what might be coming in the infrastructure bill. That's the most likely sort of picture to date that I can give you of where I think Senate Appropriations is heading on that box. And then down in the water and sewer box, the House, as it passed its budget out, applied $100 million into the Clean Water Fund, and they, for 5 years, scooped back the whole 6% of the rooms and meals tax into the general fund. So the net up in clean water would have been around $40 million. And then the capital bill was applying $30 million to clean water projects to the extent that they could be applied to save capacity in the capital bill. So that didn't represent new expenditure in the clean water world. Where I think that Senate Appropriations Committee is going to land is in terms of that clean water rooms and meals revenue redirection, it'll be a much quicker and cleaner, steeper slope. So I think to make part of the reason for that swap out of the rooms and meals tax was to make the general fund, the base of the general fund budget work for 22, and in the House's proposal a bit longer. What the Senate Appropriations Committee I think is going to do is try and take, to the extent we can, the 6% for FY22, and then have the rooms and meals tax in 23 and 24, so that the at 4% and 2%, so that it's over a 3-year period, and then the clean water fund is whole in 25, and it's a much lower redirection of that revenue for a much shorter period of time. And the other proposal is how much goes into the clean water fund from the ARPA dollar, and how much goes to water and sewer projects directly to DEC. And I think the secretary is probably the best to speak about what that split should be. We were thinking it was something in the 60-40 range. It might be different. And we'll take your recommendation on what that should be. So instead of all the ARPA dollars flowing through the clean water fund, a portion of them would flow through the clean water fund, and that portion would be higher than what the revenue reassignment is over those 3 years. But also the remaining portion of the 100 million would be directly into DEC for water and sewer projects. And I do think that the capital bill will not have the section on the 30 million in it. The 15, they were doing it over 2 years. That will be brought into the budget bill, and there will still be the opportunity to backfill 15 million of capital dollars, at least in the first year. And then the decision about the second year will be left to when you come back next year. So that's where I think the water and sewer piece is headed so far in the Senate.
Okay. And so I'm a little murky for me on the capital bill backfill 2 years. What's the norm?
It's not a norm. This was just a decision that the House Institutions Committee made when the $1 billion became apparent. It was very apparent that water projects could be used. Water projects were an allowed use of the ARPA dollars. They have capital bill dollars assigned to some clean water, and they viewed that as, well, if I can apply the ARPA dollars instead of the capital dollars, that's better for the bottom line of the capital capacity of the state. And so I don't know what the source of the 30 million exactly is, probably looking at a 2-year period. The construct of bringing all the ARPA money into one section of the area of the budget is why this would be coming out of the capital bill. And the decision to only do 1 year of it in the budget is what I think we'll end up landing on once that's taken out of the capital bill. Okay.
So maybe I'm just misinterpreting the phrase when it says backfill 2 years.
Basically, it's backfilling the general obligation bond. So the dollars, the general obligation bond money is appropriated in the capital bill. Yep. And instead of having $15 million 1 year and $15 million the other year, you would substitute that for the ARPA dollars, and you would keep that capacity within the bonded arena.
Okay.
So it would backfill the bonded money and free up that bonded money to be spent somewhere else, much like the general fund when we're talking about the.
I was just going to say, is it the 30 million? Is it become general fund dollars, or just?
No, it's still bond. It's GO bond money dollars. It's not general fund dollars. It's bond dollars.
Okay. Great. Thanks. And if on the section above, weatherization was listed at 18 million, which doesn't, there's quite a few pieces in S109.
That's all three of those pieces, the 4 million to the normal OEO weatherization program, the piece to Efficiency Vermont, and then the piece to the VHFA. So it was all,
Okay.
it was combining all three pieces into one weatherization line. It will be identified in the bill, but for the summary here, they're all weatherization activities.
Okay, so I think that we had our split was 9, 5, and 2 VHFA, Efficiency Vermont, and then so that's 16. Then there was a $2 million bump each year for the normal weatherization project. So 16 plus 2 is 18. Maybe that's what the 18 is.
So the 2 million of workforce was separate from the pieces that would actually weatherize the.
Oh, I see. Okay, so there it is.
So
we're back
it's 20
up to,
total with the
Got it.
workforce included.
Got it. Right. Just learning to keep my eyes open to watch for those numbers. Great, that helps. Secretary Moore.
My question was, and I don't believe we provided testimony, but most of what we use the capital bill dollars for is to match the state revolving fund from the feds. And I'm not sure if that was contemplated or if there's other water and sewer projects, but I think we want to make sure we're not going to end up in a position of relying on federal dollars to match federal dollars, which we're not allowed to do.
And I think that I think that will be clear when that moves into the budget bill. It'll be to the extent permissible. And so if it's not a permissible use, and I think that's why it was written that way in the capital bill.
Okay.
It wasn't an actual appropriation of ARPA dollars. It was it was an appropriation, but only to the extent that it could be.
Yeah. It's a facet of an ongoing challenge for us is that we've relied on state dollars to draw down federal funds and just need to make sure that ability is preserved.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be very handy if you could
I actually have to run to another meeting.
Yep.
Are there other questions for me?
Yeah. So
no, but thank you, Stephanie. Thanks so much.
Okay. And I'd shoot an email if there's other things that I can help with.
Great. Thanks for helping us.
Hopefully this gives sort of in a summary, a picture of the, House and governor, and then in my verbal where I think we're going to land by Monday in the budget bill. So
great.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Stephanie,
Senator McConnell.
Ms. Barrett was a student of mine at one time. So in that spirit, I'm going to suggest when she has a moment of boredom to Google funny money.
Okay.
In the spirit of 8th grade. Okay.
Is that filed right next to 5 o'clock follies?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's
All right.
It's time parallel.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
I'm going to leave you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for coming in. Great. Well, that helpful. I mean, it's there's a lot moving, and I just wanted all of us to be in a better position to sort of be comfortable and informed with where we are. It's a little unclear to me. It sounds as though there's less of an opportunity to be considering altering the dollars applied to from any fund to any project between now and January. And I think that was one of the concerns I was hearing that I had, and I think other senators had, was how much money was going to be left sort of up in the air a little bit, and would all those decisions be made while we were in essence home. And I think I've had conversations with a number of people on this committee, just chatting in the last few days about looking forward to some sort of mechanism so we can respectfully and productively remain involved to the extent that there's an opportunity to remain involved. So it sounds as though more of it will be settled than I thought only a day ago. But Senator Westman, you're on the inside of this a little more. Do you have any thoughts about how we've had 3 conversations about this. How do we serve as a useful committee that doesn't just get left out of the discussions, but we're also not interfering with anyone either?
I think a lot of this will be, it'll be interesting to see where the Appropriations Committee ends up on Monday. If I do worry a little, if there needs to be some adjustments made between now and next January, how those adjustments might be made. And should we, in that event, have some sort of a process on what to do? You know, maybe we're all set, and in that, and maybe there's enough flexibility to do that. But with the changing federal scene, I don't want any cumbersome process, but I do know flexibility is not a bad thing when the world keeps changing.
Sure. Agreed. Any other committee members have thoughts on this whole thing? I mean, this is a work in progress, and it's a first time for all of us doing this particular fire drill. So anyone want to weigh in?
You mean the fire drill where there's a fire drill where somebody gets out of one seat of the car and runs around and gets in another seat, and then
It could be.
I forget the name for that, but if I remember it, I won't state it. But it's basically the same thing we're doing with money, and when you're done, the same amount of money is still in the car, and so are the same people. They're just in different seats.
Yeah, maybe it's a 5 o'clock fire drill.
Mr. Chair.
Right? Senator Campion.
I see Secretary Moore is here. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep her if I know how busy everybody is right now. I don't know if she's on the witness list or if we're hearing, or was this just?
She's a guest of honor. So
Okay.
Since this is of mutual interest, when we had the chance to have Stephanie in to get the latest and greatest on where we are.
No, I understand. I didn't know if we were going to hear more from Secretary Moore or if we're good.
Well, you're reading my mind. That's where I was going to go next. I don't know if you, again, to loop back to, there's a political layer to all the kind of discussions, but I'm going to step aside from all that. I think what we're underneath, beyond the politics, we want to make sure that the way money is handled is the most effective and sort of strategic. So I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to share with the committee about what we just heard from Ms. Barrett, or things you're keeping your eye on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you all. I think one of the pieces that's probably most challenging to us from an administrative perspective would be to see any of the ARPA dollars deposited directly into the Clean Water Fund. I think allocating that money for work around clean water is a really exciting proposition. And we know that there are needs related to stormwater and combined sewer overflows in particular that both sort of fall under the purview of the Clean Water Board and would apparently be eligible as an ARPA related project. But once you start to mix federal and state dollars in that single pot, and we have a very specific budgeting process we adhere to for any money flowing through the Clean Water Fund, I'm concerned that it both will complicate and slow the work, and wonder if there isn't a way to instead, to the extent the legislature or the Senate follows the House's proposal to allocate $100 million for work related to clean water, to tie it to the implementation of Act 64, and either direct it to the agency or to the Department of Environmental Conservation. So it's work very much related to and in support of the mission of the Clean Water Board, but then doesn't get into the complicated budgeting process and mix federal and state funds.
Okay, so it's a different description, same purposes in the end, but a different description, a route there. So it's an allocation to the department in support of Act 64 work, as opposed to an allocation to the Clean Water Board.
Yeah, or the Clean Water Fund.
Clean Water Fund, yeah, okay, thank you. All right, any committee questions for Secretary Moore while we still have her visiting with us? Right, or any other committee discussion on money at the moment? Right, okay, well, we've balanced our checkbook, we're all done. All right.
Same number of people in the car.
Okay, so with that, I think that we have there's a witness we were going to get in on forestry related work, unavailable because of something else came up. So we have some committee business, and then I think, you know, and then in half an hour we'll be done and for the morning. And so for things on our to-do list from my side, and you may have things. Thank you, Secretary Moore.
You're welcome.
If H108, so you may remember we voted it out unanimously yesterday. I didn't turn it in because Ms. Boomhauer asked about a comma, and this was not just a stylistic comma. It was a question about the phrasing and whether or not the phrase. I'm going to pull it up in front of me so I'll read accurately. The sentence, Michael, the shorthand is Michael O'Grady rewrote the sentence. It's literally the same words in a different order, but because it was a change, I didn't feel comfortable turning it in without sharing it with the committee first. In his opinion, no, it's just a technical edit. It's a clarification, and we don't need a new draft, a new version, a new vote. But so the sentence as it read yesterday was state or municipal road or highway projects or railroad projects shall be exempt from the requirements, blah, blah, blah. Ms. Boomhauer's concern was that state or municipal road or highway, that state or municipal, that phrase, does it apply to just highway projects or railroad projects as well? And so Michael did the useful thing when things get tricky that way, just move the pieces around so that you don't have the question. So now that same sentence reads railroad projects or state or municipal road or highway projects shall be exempt.
Same number of people in the car.
Exactly. That's going to be our motto. Same number of people in the car.
But no kids in the front seat.
Yeah. Or yes. And so if the committee is fine with that, I'll turn that in as amended, but I did want to share it before doing that. Okay, great. So I'll turn in 108 today. Just a reminder to folks, again, for anyone you're confirming, an email to the secretary plus Vanessa is all we need, or all you'll need, and then it will go on notice and then on the list. ARPA, so the ARPA follow-up, Senator Westman is saying the budget will be out Monday. So feeling like we're as productively up to date as we could be. Once the budget comes out, I'm guessing we'll want to talk about this further, but for now, I don't know there's anything more for us to do. Unless anyone else has something they want to chip in on that one.
Just hooray for commas. Hooray for commas. They really do change the meaning. They make it clear. And it's very annoying. I've had editors change where I did or didn't use a comma and actually changed what I was saying. That little squiggle really made, you know the one about it was like two brothers and a sister quarreling over their father's will. He left his fortune to my 3 children in equal parts to the son, comma, the son and the daughter. No comma after the second son, which meant equal parts. The one son gets half and the other son and the daughter split the other half. That's what that means because of the absence of a comma. So I'm fine with the editorial change you made.
All right. Well, what I liked about Mr. O'Grady's rewrite was it eliminated the comma thing by just taking the phrase out and moving it up.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. You can't misread it anymore, or it can't be left with a question. Next week, so we're going to follow up on we had a good conversation this week about forestry. So I'm lining up some people to come in on forestry, and we'll continue the discussion. So take a look when the agenda's out at who's on the list, and we'll have more than one bite at the apple, but we can add to that list. The other thing is we're having a joint meeting. House Natural Fish and Wildlife is going to join us on Wednesday. I don't know how many members of this committee have been receiving emails about questions of how the state is proceeding to implement the universal recycling law in terms of food residuals. So one of the concerns is that because of turning to depackaging technology, which literally rips things apart to get the food out of the package, so you automate the process, but part of that automation means you end up with packaging in bits in the food residuals. So it's less clean, it's contaminated by the packaging itself. Some of that packaging is plastics, and we're learning more and more that plastics are, forever chemicals. They have non-benign properties, and why would we want to start weaving plastics into the food residual chain, especially if the food residuals, one of the maybe a highest, I'd have to go back and look at the hierarchy, but I believe one of the highest uses is for creating compost and soil building. So it reminds me a little bit of the municipal sludge issue. What do we want to see getting applied to the land? And is there a better way to do it? I don't know the answers on that, but it seemed like an important question because the handling of food residuals just got stepped up in this past year because of going all the way down to the residential level. So I know that I talked to Chair Sheldon, the House is interested, so they're going to join us. We'll have a 90-minute joint session and we'll take a look. It's really an oversight meeting, we'll hear from people out in the field who have these concerns, hear from the department about how they're implementing, and then have some committee discussion around it and perhaps some next steps, acknowledging that we're near the end of the session. So we'll have to figure out, based on what we learned, we'll figure out what we'll do next.
We had some of that yesterday, Mr. Chair, when we had the mechanical approach to dealing with television sets and leaded glass.
Right.
And that would be a chemical issue, and this one would be organic, but they're driving within similar automobiles.
Yes, yeah. We also have some, Senator McDonald was talking to us about, mentioned before, standard offer. And Ms. Campbell had come in and talked about, how do you keep the sun shining at night? The answer was associating storage with renewable generation. So want to take a look at standard offer, which is in its end phase. Learn more about actually where we are. It's 127 megawatts was the original program. I don't know where we are in terms of hitting that boundary, but so we'll learn about where we are running
per project.
On how we might extend it. Yeah.
Was the 127 per project?
No, sorry, 127 megawatts in total.
Okay, thank you.
The figure I remember from like 2 years ago was we were at something like 76. The other thing that happens with standard offer is people put in bids. They win the bid with the lowest price, and then they don't end up implementing because they don't see a way to actually make money with their winning bid. But meanwhile, those megawatts are not necessarily released back to be rebid. So I don't know how much is sort of tied up, but not actually being constructed yet. And that's another question for us.
We have to come up with the name for those unused bids. Yeah. But we'll
right. and it's a frustration to some people who would like to bid because one way to win the bid is come in a little lower than everybody else, but it may be that it wasn't a practical bid, and now you've sort of removed the opportunity from someone else who could do something at a slightly higher price, but they would actually go ahead and build the thing. Whereas
A bit of a dog in the manger aspect to that.
Yeah, right. And that's all. Let me take a quick look at the list I have, see if I see anything else open. No, I'm sure there's a little more, but oh yeah. So the one other thing that's hanging out there with a big question mark floating over it is the administration's proposal that Ms. Murkowski shared with us the other day around exemptions from Act 250 for ARPA funded projects. So we've talked about it. I've talked with Senator Ballant, who's on approach plus our pro tem, and there's a conversation with Senator Kitchell about not allowing that language to travel with the money, which I believe is what the administration is interested in having it do. So, but I'm not going to assume anything. We would keep our eye on that one. It's a little discouraging, honestly, to have the answer over and over and over again to any kind of perceived flaw with Act 250 to be to simply exempt yourself from Act 250, as opposed to defining the flaw in a manner that people would actually say, that is a problem and could be improved, and then fixing it. So as I had said in caucus, we look at regional, municipal, and statewide planning, Title 24, Title 10, et cetera. We're not so wedded to Act 250 per se that that's the only tool we bring to the table. But I think my sense is we're committed to having the best tools available, not saying we're going to just exempt ourselves from good planning. So, Senator McCormick, I know you have feelings on that one.
Yeah,
I think we all do.
Yeah, getting back to the caucus last night, I rather enjoy expressing ideas clearly and putting things into words. It's really the only talent I have. And it's very difficult to shut up when someone else has really said it perfectly. But I did, because I thought that others were getting it and did not need my wisdom to improve on it. So thank you for your wisdom last night. Rich wasn't there. That came up in the Democratic caucus, Rich.
Okay. So thank you everyone for a good week. We did a lot of channel surfing between different things, which seems to be part and parcel of the last weeks of any session. I'm going to keep my eyes, I'd ask every member of the committee to keep your eyes and ears open for bits and pieces traveling in other bills, so that we don't have things bypass us either intentionally or inadvertently on the home stretch. I think we might have to pull in 3, 4, or 5 education bills. I know they're running amok down there, but other than that, I think everyone else is behaving this year. Okay, so we're done early today. It's almost 10 o'clock. We're on the floor 11:30, and